There is a specific reason that intelligent, self-aware people stay in jobs they have already decided are wrong for them, and it is not the reason most people assume. It is not fear of failure. It is not comfort. It is not laziness or lack of direction or some deficiency in the willingness to change. It is something more precise than any of those, and it has a name. If you are someone who can see the problem clearly, has been able to see it clearly for months or possibly years, and is still showing up, this video is about the specific mechanism responsible for that gap. Not as a critique of it, as an explanation of it, because the gap between knowing and moving is not evidence of weakness. It is evidence of something much more specific. And once you see it, the experience of being stuck becomes fundamentally different. The standard explanations for staying in the wrong career are familiar by now. Fear of change, comfort zone, loss aversion, risk tolerance. And if you have been carrying this long enough, you have probably encountered all of them in articles, in conversations, possibly in sessions with a therapist or a coach. Here is what almost no one acknowledges about those explanations. For a certain kind of person, they don't hold. Not because the concepts are wrong, because they are incomplete. Fear of change is a real phenomenon, but it does not explain why someone who regularly navigates complex professional challenges, who has demonstrated, repeatedly, the capacity to manage uncertainty and perform under pressure, cannot seem to initiate a transition they have already decided to make. Comfort zone theory does not explain it either, because the person in the wrong career is often deeply uncomfortable. The discomfort is the entire point. What they are not doing is leaving it. And staying in comfort is not an accurate description of what chronic professional misalignment actually feels like from the inside. And loss aversion, while real and well documented, describes a general human tendency. It does not account for the specific paralysis of someone who has already done the analysis, already identified the loss, already decided the loss is worth bearing, and is still not moving. This is the gap that the standard explanations leave open. And it is the gap that this video is going to close. Because the reason intelligent, self-aware people stay, even when they know, even when they have decided, even when the dissatisfaction has become a daily presence, is not a general human tendency. It is a specific mechanism, and specific mechanisms have specific exits. So here is what is actually happening. The human brain does not treat all costs equally. It does not register visible costs and invisible costs on the same ledger. And that asymmetry is the mechanism responsible for more professional paralysis than any other single factor. The costs of leaving a wrong career are visible, they are specific, they are nameable, they arrive in the imagination fully formed. The income gap, the identity disruption, the conversations with people who will not understand, the period of uncertainty before the new thing is real enough to point to. The brain runs those numbers constantly. It can quote them on demand. It renders them in high definition. The costs of staying are not like that. They are chronic rather than acute. They arrive not as a single sharp event, but as a daily background condition. The low-grade energy drain of maintaining a professional identity that no longer fits. The small recurring transaction of presenting a version of yourself you have outgrown. The performance tax collected every morning before the first meeting even begins. Research on what behavioral economists call adaptation, the way human beings adjust to stable negative conditions over time, consistently shows that chronic costs become harder to perceive the longer they persist. The nervous system adapts. The discomfort becomes the baseline. What was once noticeable is now just the texture of the day. And because the cost of staying is no longer registering as a cost, because it has been absorbed into what normal feels like, the brain's accounting system produces a profoundly distorted picture. On one side of the ledger, the cost of leaving. Vivid, specific, immediate, quantifiable. On the other side, the cost of staying. Invisible, chronic, effectively zero in the daily calculation. This is the asymmetry, and this is why the decision to stay is not actually a decision in the way most people think about decisions. It is the output of a calculation that was never designed to measure what it is being asked to measure. The brain that evolved to respond to visible acute threats, the predator, the fall, the sudden loss, was not built to accurately track the compound interest of chronic misalignment. It is not a character flaw. It is a predictable output of a system doing exactly what it was designed to do, and being applied to a problem it was not designed to solve. Not broken, misaligned. And now you know why. Now comes the part of this that tends to land differently than the rest. Because understanding the mechanism intellectually is one thing. Seeing the real ledger, the one the accounting system has been hiding, is another. The quiet version, the one you don't say out loud, is this: staying is not free. It has never been free. Every day spent maintaining a professional identity that no longer fits costs something real. It costs the specific energy required to perform competence you don't believe in, to produce work with precision and care for outcomes you cannot locate a genuine reason to care about. It costs the low-grade cognitive load of monitoring the gap, the distance between who you are at work and who you are everywhere else, and managing it well enough that no one can see it clearly. It costs the version of you that shows up to the people in your life after the performance is over, the flattened, depleted, slightly absent version that has already spent what it had. And it costs something harder to name but more significant than all of those. It costs time, not in the abstract, in the specific non-renewable unit of time that accumulates into a professional life, and eventually into the retrospective question of what that life was actually spent on. A pattern that appears consistently in research on career regret is not "I wish I had worked harder." It is not "I wish I had been more patient." The most common form of professional regret, documented across multiple longitudinal studies on work and meaning, is the regret of having waited, of having stayed in the misalignment longer than the evidence required. This is the cost the accounting system was not charging, not because the cost wasn't real, because it was invisible, absorbed into the background, adapted to, normalized until it stopped feeling like a cost and started feeling like just the way things are. The emotional climax of this video is not a revelation about what you should do. It is a correction of the ledger. The cost of staying was never zero. It was being billed in a currency your nervous system had stopped tracking, and the balance has been accruing the entire time. Seeing that clearly, really seeing it, not as an abstract idea, but as a specific accounting of what has been spent, changes the calculation. Not because leaving suddenly becomes easy, because the decision you have been making by default finally becomes visible as a decision. And decisions that are visible can be made differently. If what this video opened is the question of what the other side of that ledger actually looks like for you, what you actually want, what your real strengths and patterns are underneath the career you were shaped into, there is a structured tool in the description built exactly for that work. It is called the Career Archeology Spreadsheet. It does not ask you to imagine a new future. It asks you to look at your own history, specifically and concretely, and extract the self-knowledge that is already there, waiting to be named. The link is in the description and pinned in the comments. And that brings us to the practical question. If the mechanism is asymmetric cost visibility, if the reason the calculation keeps producing stay is that one side of the ledger is invisible, then the exit is not a decision. It is a perceptual shift, making the invisible visible. This does not require a plan. It does not require clarity about what comes next. It does not require financial certainty or a fully formed alternative or permission from anyone in your life. It requires one thing: an honest accounting of what staying is actually costing, not in the abstract. In specifics, what does the performance tax look like in your particular situation? The specific energy it takes to maintain the version of yourself that shows up to work, the gap between that version and every other version, and what is left at the end of a day spent managing that distance? The reason specificity matters is not therapeutic, it is mechanical. The brain registers vivid, specific costs differently than it registers vague, chronic ones. The act of naming the cost in concrete terms, writing it, saying it out loud, letting it exist as a real and specific number rather than a background hum, begins to rebalance the ledger the accounting system was never accurately maintaining. This is not a leap, it is not a plan, it is not a commitment to anything. It is the first honest step, the one that does not require you to know what comes next, only to see clearly what is happening now. And here is what tends to follow from that step for anyone who has been in this place. The staying does not immediately end. The financial obligations do not dissolve. The complexity of the transition does not simplify. But something in the quality of the stuck changes, because you are no longer choosing by default. You are choosing with the real ledger in front of you, and a choice made with accurate information is a fundamentally different thing than a choice made with half the data missing. One honest acknowledgement before this closes. The mechanism this video named is real and universal. The way it expresses itself is always personal. Your financial situation is specific. Your family context is specific. The years invested in the field you are questioning are specific. None of those factors disappear, because the mechanism has been named. What changes is not the complexity. What changes is the accuracy of the picture. And accurate pictures, even complicated ones, are always more useful than the distorted version your accounting system was producing before you clicked on this video. You already know enough to take the next step. Not the leap. The next step. If this opens something you want to go deeper on, the Career Archeology spreadsheet in the description is where that work continues. Structured, concrete, and built for exactly the moment after a video like this one. Link in the description. Pinned in the comments. What was the moment you first realized the cost of staying was higher than you had been admitting, and what made it finally visible? So here is what this video has actually been about. Not why smart people stay in jobs they hate as a general curiosity. The specific psychological mechanism, asymmetric cost visibility, that makes the decision to leave feel disproportionately dangerous even to people who have already decided it is necessary. The cost of leaving is vivid, specific, and immediately legible to the brain. The cost of staying is chronic, invisible, and effectively zeroed out by the adaptation your nervous system performed, quietly, without your consent, over months or years of normalized misalignment. That asymmetry is not a character flaw. It is a predictable output of cognition applied to a problem it was never designed to handle. You did not know that with this precision before you clicked. Now you do. And the reason that matters is not that it makes the decision easy. It does not. And any version of this that implied otherwise would not be worth your time. The reason it matters is that you can now see both sides of the ledger. The cost of leaving, visible as it always was. The cost of staying, visible now, perhaps for the first time. Not as a background hum, but as a real and specific accounting of what has been spent and what will continue to be spent. For every day, the default choice continues to be made. You are not more motivated than you were 15 minutes ago. You are more located. You understand the mechanism that was running the calculation without your full awareness. And you understand that the paralysis it produced was not evidence of insufficient courage or insufficient self-knowledge or any other version of the story that ends with the problem being who you are. Not broken, misaligned. And now you can see the shape of the misalignment clearly enough to begin. Not to leap, not to decide everything at once, but to take the first honest step from a picture that is finally accurate. That is a different place to be standing than where you were when this started. Carry that.